Well, this video is in reference to all of these unfounded statements about Ron Paul being racist based off of him saying he wouldn't have voted for the Civil Rights Act. Now, first of all, I want you guys to recognize the political games played throughout the mainstream media. You know what I mean? Now, the term racism gets thrown around like monkeys throwing shit at a zoo. You know what I mean? Like, it bothers me. You know what I mean? It bothers me that newscasters will go on national TV and just label somebody racist without ever actually investigating the racist claims. You know what I mean? And regardless if a candidate is even racist or not, the fact that they've been labeled as racist, once it's out there, it's out there. You know what I mean? And people run with it. You got the internet that's just filled with a bunch of repeaters. You know what I mean? And me as a black guy, I'm supporting Ron Paul for 2012. You know what I mean? He has the best ideas. He has the best grasp on what the American tradition was initially set out to be, that being a free and just society. You know what I mean? Whose main goal was to promote liberty. You know what I mean? And through us ensuring that our citizens are guaranteed the liberties and the rights that have been listed in our Constitution, not granted by our Constitution, but listed within the Constitution. To me, that's the only real way you can properly spread our way of life throughout the world, by setting an example, not through the barrel of a gun. Which leads me to Ron Paul's ideas on foreign policy and stuff like that. I think he has the most sensible approach to how we should be dealing with other nations. You know what I mean? We shouldn't be pressuring people of different faiths, different creeds to succumb to what we do, you know what I mean, through force and stuff like that. The best way to do it is to set the example and do it the right way at home, you know what I mean? How can we promote democracy and freedom and rights abroad when we're constantly being stripped daily through legislation like the Patriot Act, internet censorship and shit like that, you know what I mean? But back to the Ron Paul and the Civil Rights Act, you know what I mean? Pretty much because I've been reading a lot of articles today about Ron Paul being racist because he wouldn't have voted for the Civil Rights Act. And most people, it's like their thought process doesn't go through the full in-depth analysis of the statement, you know what I mean? It's easy to read a headline that says Ron Paul wouldn't have voted for the Civil Rights Act and then initially just label him as racist, you know what I mean? But the reasons behind him not voting for the Civil Rights Act, the civil rights legislation, as it was written, was because not for any racial beliefs or anything like that. Like Ron Paul does not believe black people are less human than white people. I can guarantee you that. You know what I mean? He promotes freedom and liberty for all people. You know what I mean? He has the most common sense understanding for the prison industrial complex and how it's set up in a way to basically entrap mostly minorities. You know what I mean? And the drug laws and the drug policy, and how basically our war on drugs, like the first law against any kind of drug, making it illegal, was based off of racial tensions and racial propaganda. You know what I mean? Like going back to marijuana and shit like that. The reason why they outlawed that initially was because of its diverse application. You know what I mean? Like you can make anything from marijuana. They made Henry Ford made a car that ran off of hemp seed oil, and it was actually built from hemp, and it was damn near indestructible. You know what I mean? But so Ron Paul's stance on the Civil Rights Act, the only problem that he had with it was a problem of principle, which is what I see being his strongest characteristic, but it also hurts him in such a way, you know what I mean? Because his interviews on TV, like it's very limited, you know what I mean? His time to respond to certain questions, and the way they frame these questions, it's to get a certain type of response from the person who's being interviewed, you know what I mean? But when it comes down to it, his biggest beef with the Civil Rights Act was that it was a federal mandate telling business owners basically how to run their businesses, you know what I mean? But the way I can see it being spun in the media, it's so disingenuous and it's so unhonest, you know what I mean? I mean, looking at a newscaster. You know what I mean? If this is your job, the equivalent to labeling Ron Paul a racist is like, it's like gross negligence and it's malfeasance. It's like common sense isn't even applied to the debate or the conversation. You know what I mean? Like, his problem with it is more so when it comes down to property rights. You know what I mean? And property rights meaning that anybody who decides to open up a business in a free market should be the end all and be all of who it is or how their business would be run. You know what I mean? Now, as far as going back to the 60s and the Civil Rights Act and all that stuff about how there was a bunch of businesses in the South about where whites only, they didn't serve black people weren't allowed to go into those establishments and stuff like that. You know what I mean? We can all look back on that and say that, yo, that's wrong. You know what I mean? Like, who the hell are you? You know what I mean? Like, we can all look back at that time in our history and we can say that that society that was in place at the time is what basically set the standard. You know what I mean? For that moment in time as to where racism was okay and this and that. But since then, there's been a huge paradigm shift. And I totally agree with Ron Paul on well, not agree, but like I'm not offended at all by the fact that he wouldn't have voted for the Civil Rights Act based off of property rights issue. You know what I mean? Because if we looked at businesses today, right? And if we just said, you know what I mean, like, yo, you can serve whoever you want. If you want a whites only coffee shop, it's up to you. Go ahead, go for it. You know why? Because the paradigm shift since the 60s has been so drastic that we can all now look at each other with a certain level of respect. You know what I mean? And we can say, some of my best friends are white. You know what I mean? And we can all basically honestly look at each other and say, yeah, we're all equal people here. You know what I mean? And in a free market, if someone would be dumb enough to close off a large portion of the country, you know what I mean, based off of a racial issue, I mean, based off of a free market principle, they would put themselves out of business because there would be a coffee shop down the street who would serve blacks and whites, and they would get twice as much revenue. You know what I mean? Anybody who would be dumb enough to run a business based off of racial segregation, you know what I mean, in today's society, they would go out of business, you know what I mean? But a lot of that has to do with the marchings of Martin Luther King and all that stuff, and just the philosophical change that happened throughout the country at the time, you know what I mean? So my advice to a lot of the people out there, when it comes to these news articles who are trying to slander Ron Paul's name based off of racial issues and stuff like that, don't even pay it any attention, because any good debater can look at personal attacks as the first sign of a failing argument. You know what I mean? So they'd rather promote Ron Paul the racist so that he wouldn't get your vote. You know what I mean? And they can push some other fucking neocon or fucking another Obama on you. You know what I mean? But the fact is, there is no message stronger throughout man's history that can bring people together, no matter what color, what creed, what religion, than freedom and liberty. You know what I mean? And if you're gonna buy into the racial wedge issues that the likes of MSNBC, like I was watching Chris Matthews' interview today, and Ron Paul pretty much owned his ass. You know what I mean? Like, he was basically trying to frame the debate, frame the argument in such a way to where he can portray Ron Paul as being a racist. You know what I mean? And the fact of the matter is, dude, Ron Paul is more pro-black Americans than President Obama. You know what I mean? Like, on some real shit, because Obama's still willing to lock your black ass up if you get caught smoking a J, you know what I mean? Like, Ron Paul's like, look, I have no business telling you how to live your life within your home, you know what I mean? And if you look at that argument, the whole drug war argument, there's nobody making any more sense than Ron Paul, because in today's society, it's okay if we want to stay in our house, have a beer, smoke a cigarette, you know what I mean? It's all right, you know what I mean? But if we were to go outside the door, publicly intoxicated and start a fight, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's illegal, you know what I mean? That's the proper way to regulate it, you know what I mean? And the alcohol business is a lucrative business, you know what I mean? There's a lot of money being made off of that, you know what I mean? And despite the fact that alcohol kills more people than pretty much any other illegal drug, you know what I mean? It's almost ridiculous, you know what I mean? So I mean, just